Are your valves making a lot of noise? Or maybe your bike's getting a little harder to start. Maybe you just want to check the valve lash because that's what the book says to do. Here are some of the tools that you'll be needing to perform a valve adjustment on your Honda Ruckus or Metropolitan scooter. First is a feeler gauge for measuring the valve lash, which is the distance between the valve shim and the rocker arm. You'll also need a magnet of some sort for easily removing the valve shims. I recommend a caliper or micrometer for measuring the size of the valve shims. You'll need an 8mm wrench for loosening the cylinder head bolts. I also like to use a T-handle as you see there, but that's not necessary. You're going to need a shim kit to replace the old shims with. And finally, an OEM service manual is a good idea to familiarize yourself with the job before you do the work and to get recommended factory specifications. You're going to need a spark plug wrench too. To begin your valve job, you're going to go ahead and remove the body panels from the back of the bike. I didn't show this part in the video because it's different for the Honda Ruckus and the Metropolitan. To get started, we're going to go ahead and remove the spark plug. Taking the spark plug out makes it so it's easy to turn the engine over so that when you're turning it over, it doesn't build up compression. It's very easy to turn the engine over with the spark plug out. For the next step, we're going to disconnect these couple of hoses that connect to the valve cover. And this one right back here. That one's usually more of a booger to get off, but I had it pre-loosened. And we're going to go ahead and remove the bolts that hold the valve cover onto the cylinder head. This is where the T-handle comes in real handy if you got one. But a regular socket or wrench or whatever, it serves the purpose just fine. Once you break the bolts loose, it's easy to twist them out with your fingers. Then, with all the bolts out, you can remove the valve cover. You can see a few things in here already. You've got the timing chain, you've got the camshaft, which you can't quite see in the video, you've got the rocker arms, and so forth. One of the first things you should pay attention to when you open up the valve cover and you look inside of here is the timing marks. You've got one here on the plate and then you've got another here on the camshaft sprocket. You want these aligned, but you don't just want them aligned any old way. You want them aligned so that they are aligned on top dead center on the compression stroke. And what that means is that if these two marks are aligned, your camshaft lobes that you can see down in here are going to be facing away from you. They're going to be facing the cylinder. Okay, so our marks are aligned the way that they're supposed to be. So now we want to check for valve lash and see what we've got. Now the first thing that I usually do in this situation is I'll actually grab the rocker arm and I'll wiggle it a little bit with my fingers and see just if I have any play that I can detect with my fingers there. The exhaust valve I have a little bit of play on. You want to feel that rocker arm actually move. On the intake valve, however, if I go to grab that and wiggle it up and down, I can't. Meaning that the valve lash is non-existent. It's way too tight, and that's why this engine isn't running, because the shim in there is too large and it's actually holding the valve open just a little bit. When you can't feel any play whatsoever on there, that means that valve's open. That happens, you double check and make sure you've got your camshaft aligned right, but in this situation it is aligned correctly and we need to change that shim. Removing the shim is actually quite easy. If you look at the rocker arm, you'll notice that the shaft that it rides on has a spring on it. And I apologize that I know you can't see this in the video, it's very difficult, but I'll do my best to explain it. The rocker arm slides on this pin, and it's got this spring on it, and you can actually take the rocker arm and you can push it towards the spring. I think you could probably see that. So you push the rocker arm towards the spring, and then you actually have the valve shim exposed, and so you can just barely make that out. I'm going to reach in there with my magnet and pull that valve shim out, and that, and it's hard to see, is what the valve shim looks like. It's just a little round disc that's precision ground to a certain size. To adjust the valves, you replace those shims to the size that you need. I'm going to elaborate just a little bit here on sliding the rocker arm to the side, as I was mentioning before. It's actually pretty easy to do. You can see here there's a spring down in here, and you can actually slide this whole rocker arm off to the side like such. Now if you look down in the hole there, you can see the camshaft lobe. You can slide this over to the side and push the rocker arm so that it's held by the camshaft lobe, and that will allow you to easily get the shim in and out. You can remove and install the shim with a magnet. To remove the shim, slide your rocker arm to the side and pick up the shim with your magnet. To install a shim, I like to leave it flat on the magnet like that. Put it down into the seat there, and that's it. So removing and installing. It's pretty easy. Now that we've got that old valve shim out, we're going to use our calipers and we're going to measure the old shim. Now a lot of times the actual size of the shim is printed on the shim itself, or laser etched, or what have you. Most of the time it's worn off and you can no longer see it. So we'll measure it. And we get 1.90 millimeters for our valve shim. So we know we need something smaller than that. Okay, I just grabbed a 1.60 millimeter shim, and we're just going to do a trial fit on that to see how it fits, and then we can measure the valve lash. Shim mounted over here on the magnet, and we're just going to stick it in there, slide the magnet off to the side, and then we'll pop that rocker arm back in place. Your typical feeler gauges look something like this, almost like a pocket knife with a whole bunch of blades in it here. All these different blades measure different thicknesses. The thicknesses of the blades are laser etched onto them. Because I adjust so many valves, I simply unscrewed the screw here and removed the blade that I use the most often. I've got 3 and 4 thousandths are the ones that I use a whole lot. So with that said, we're going to take the blade and we're going to check our valve lash. Alright, now we're going to check the valve lash. We'll start with a 3 thousandths feeler gauge. We're going to slide that right there in between the valve shim and the rocker arm. That slides in real easily. It's too loose. The valve lash is definitely greater than 3 thousandths of an inch. I'll move on up. Let's try 5. A little more difficult. Still pretty loose. Alright. And this is a 6 thousandths or 0.15 millimeters. Try that one. And we're getting there. Still a little bit loose. Alright. 7 thousandths. It feels a lot better. A lot more friction in there. Well, just for good measure. Let's try 8 thousandths of an inch, which is 0.2 millimeters. Alright, it goes in, but very reluctantly. That's way too tight. So we're definitely going to settle with 7 thousandths.